get over here. He's calling all night.
Oh, jeez. Here come the nerds. It's time to talk to the interested and interesting.
I was wondering when the nerd would come.
And here's your host, Mike Thayer.
Well, hello. Welcome to yet another episode of Calling All Nerds, where I talk to the interested and interesting. This episode is brought to you by my book, Passage to Avalon. It is book one in the children's fantasy series, The Epic Adventures of the Techno Wizard. It is a story about a boy who gets transported to an alternate world, but still maintains cell phone signal back to Earth. So he gets to post about all of his adventures on Facebook and social media and YouTube and the rest. He becomes the most famous boy in the world, and he's not even in the world anymore. And his mom even gets to text him and catch up with him every once in a while. And he's got all these technological gadgets and gizmos, so they think he's a wizard, so they call him the Techno Wizard. It's a pretty awesome series. The audiobook comes out mid-September, so by the time this episode airs, the audiobook will be out. I also do all the narration for the audiobook. I do all the voices. Cornelius, he's a medieval cowboy. You got Rowena, she's absolutely from Scotland. That's absolutely great. And Sam himself, this is the protagonist. He's a boy, he's a kid. He's cool. Anyway, it was a lot of fun doing the audiobook, so go check that out. This week, as far as the interested and interesting that I talked to Greg Olsen, world-famous painter, at his home studio in Heber, Utah. Greg was a very gracious host, showed me an incredible space that he's built up there in Heber. His home studio is awesome. I got the chills when I walked into his home studio, literally. I walked through the door, you see all of his cool props he has from just tons of different paintings in the past. He has a bunch of his originals there, he has some copies, it's all just set up, huge open sort of environment, has a loft sort of balcony that we did our interview on, so I apologize if the recording comes across a bit echoey, but there was no way I was not going to do the podcast interview while sitting up there on those two chairs, kind of overlooking his studio. So really cool, big open windows as well. The piece de resistance, as it were, is this ginormous swing that hangs down from the ceiling. So I don't know if we talked about that in the interview or not, but afterwards I climbed up, and this swing is like, I don't know, hangs from these chains like this 30-foot high ceiling. And I asked him, why on earth do you have this swing in the middle of your studio? And his reply was, you can't help but smile when you're on this swing. And true to form, I would have to agree. You get on it, you kind of feel like a goof, but it's just a surreal experience to swing kind of full length in the studio, surrounded by all these incredible paintings, these world famous paintings, some originals, as I said, and some prints, and you're swinging in sort of towards this big open window. And Greg asked me what music I wanted, so I said Imagine Dragons. So it's just, his studio is just thumping with Imagine Dragons as I was swinging back and forth. It truly was a surreal experience. Could not wipe the smile off my face. Greg was just awesome. One of the reasons why I wanted to interview Greg, I talk about it during the interview, was Greg actually came to my elementary school when I was a kid and showed us some of his paintings. And it stuck with me for a very long time because he actually used models. And I'll let the interview kind of talk through this, but he used models in my neighborhood for his paintings, and I wanted to be in one of his paintings. So I try to kind of pass that along when I go do school visits as well for my book. I have a chance for kids to win a prize to get their name in the next Techno Wizard novel, which I thought was pretty cool. But I got the idea sort of from sitting there and watching Greg do his presentations. But one of the real reasons why, again, I wanted to interview Greg was I have this mental list of people in my head, and this might be true or not when you examine their lives or get to know them better, but this list of people who I feel like are basically being themselves, are doing what they want to do, and are being rewarded handsomely for it. And again, like as far as movie stars and actors, like Jerry Seinfeld, Jerry just kind of does what he wants. He loves comedy. He does his Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. Turned down a bunch of offers to, have additional sitcoms or whatever else because he didn't want to do it. And he's, a bajillionaire, and he just seems like he's got life figured out. He just seems like a happy person. Chris Pratt is another one. Speaks his mind. Talks very openly about religion in a place that doesn't really welcome that. And gets rewarded handsomely for it. It just looks like kind of a guy who's himself and gets rewarded for it. Not to say these people don't work hard. They all work extremely hard, and that's kind of part of the formula. But they just seem like when you talk about people that have it all, these are just people that enjoy what they're doing. Joe Rogan is another perfect example. He can get on and he can speak his mind. He doesn't have to, I guess to some degree he might watch what he's saying, but he's critically thinking through things, and he truly enjoys what he's doing. I don't think he'd be doing anything else. He's got an awesome setup at his studio, and he just seems like he gets to do the things that he likes to do, and again, get rewarded handsomely for it. So those are sort of the Hollywood level type folks. Then I have more local level folks. Brandon Mull, Brandon Sanderson, two writers, two authors. And again, I'm sure if you knew these people, you could examine their lives, and they might not be as awesome on the exterior as I make it out to be. They could have marriage problems. They could have all sorts of stuff. That's not really what I'm talking about. But it just looks like people who, as kind of Brandon Mull said, are employing their best talents, right? So what would you rather be doing? And they'd respond, nothing. This is it. This is, I'm doing exactly what I love doing. And I always had this sort of sneaking suspicion that Greg was one of those people, and man, did he not disappoint. Greg is one of these people to a T. He's probably highest up on the list. Again, Greg works extremely hard. I love hearing these stories about how people go from sort of not necessarily rags to riches, but starving student to world famous creative or entrepreneur or businessman or professional or whatever else. And Greg embodies that to a T. I'm a bit sort of self-imposed in that position now after having left my job and starting to write full-time my kids' fantasy series. I am very interested in people's road to success and how they did it and how those early years were, because that's where I'm at, and you'll hear me ask Greg those questions. But one of those things, when you go online and you look at all these, you see these ads for these people who are sort of life coaches or teaching you how to make millions or whatever else. A lot of their secrets are you find someone who's already figured it out, right? You find someone, you look at them and you go, I want that person's life. They are where I want to be. And then you attach yourself at their hip, and then you learn all their secrets, right? You kind of become their apprentice. Part of the problem being in engineering, I found a lot of people who worked real hard and had lots of money, but I didn't see anybody above me that I kind of wanted to be them. When I first hired in, I was like, oh, I want to be a vice president one day. And then you kind of get to know what their lives are like, and I quickly decided I don't want to be, I would like their money, but I definitely didn't want to be them. So I started searching, and I couldn't really find anyone. There's plenty of people I liked. There's people I respected and looked up to, for sure. Great people at Exxon and across oil and gas as a whole. But I couldn't find someone who I thought, I want what they have. I want their life, ostensibly. I'm fine with my family and whatever else, but I want their profession, their professional life. I want to do and accomplish and create like that person does. It first kind of struck me when I was at LTUE, Life, the Universe, and Everything. It's a symposium down in Provo, Utah. And I saw James Dashner. He's author of a bunch of kind of young adult books, The Maze Runner and a few other series. And he was talking about how he needed to go down to South Africa to record his cameo for the third movie. And I just thought, I want this guy's life. I want to write a cool, awesome series that's respected the world over. I got to be flying to South Africa. And I'm sure people will tell you it's not all it's cracked up to be. I don't know. I think it is. I think that would be all it's cracked up to be. As I said, I just quit my job and writing full time. It's been awesome. I've loved the freedom. I've loved everything about it. So anyway, I sort of had this list, and Greg's not. I'm not going to be a world famous artist. I couldn't and don't necessarily want to be, but I wanted that sort of lifestyle template, that lifestyle mentor or example, sort of like a passive mentor, someone that can show me, look, this is possible. I can be handsomely rewarded for being me. I can monetize my passions. And that's what this whole next phase of my life is about, is monetizing my passions, funneling all these things I want to do and all of my best talents together into one brand, whether it be entertainment or inspiration or education or whatever it is that I can offer to the world. What does that look like, and can I be rewarded for it? So I had a lot of this in kind of the back of my brain as I was interviewing Greg, and he seems to be a person that just has stuff figured out. Again, had some pretty lean years, and I'd like to hear about, he's got some awesome stories about it. But without further ado, I now give you my interview with Greg Olsen.
This is kind of a cool thing you're doing.
It's just part of me trying to take my life back a little bit. It's,
That's cool.
10 years, and I don't really have any regrets going into engineering and getting my chemical engineering degree and traveling all over the world. And I think I wouldn't change it if I was to do it over again. But I don't know. A lot of it happened. A lot of it was with when my dad died. I kind of just started rethinking things. I mean, he was older, but still. I thought he was going to live till he was 110, and he should have.
How old was he?
He was 88.
88.
Well, he worked full time till he was 84. He
You
retired.
got some good genes going for you.
Yeah, he just retired a couple years ago, and he hadn't aged a day. You back and look at the pictures from when he was like 83, 84. He looked the same as when he was in his 70s, when he was in his 60s. Wow. And then the cancers hit, and then he got miraculously cured by one, and then the second one hit. Actually, it was the third one because he had prostate cancer back in his 70s. And there was no comeback from that one, and it was just crazy how it happened. And when he passed away, I just kind of was like, my dad was about like, go out, get your degree, go in a field. He had two sons work for ExxonMobil, the most like sure bet that there was, And he was born in the Great Depression, so getting a job and holding a job was the most important thing. And then when he passed away, it was kind of like I kind of allowed myself to kind of like, all right, that advice and that drive got me to a certain spot, and now I kind of have permission a bit to kind of look laterally. And I'd been writing, and I'd come out with my book, and I don't know, work was a beast. Work up in Montana has not been easy, and it all sort of just kind of came together at the same time. And I remember sitting down. Actually, I spoke at my dad's funeral, and I sat down. And the kind of the story I tell is I look up and I saw the clock in the church. And I was like, that's the same clock I looked at when I was 7, 8, 9 years old. And I was like, why would that clock tick faster? I just want to get out and watch the 49ers game, throw passes. And then when I sat down, I was like, that clock's just kept on ticking. And now I want it to tick slower. And now I was like, why can't it tick slower? Story. And I was like, I just knew at that moment, I'd never had like a stronger epiphany in my life. It just said, you got to quit your job.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't know how financially we're going to make it work. We've gotten used to a certain lifestyle. We've traveled the world. We've done all this stuff. And I was just like, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I can't stand for that clock to go around one more revolution without me doing something I love.
Hats off to you. That's a huge thing.
It's been crazy.
And it does get harder the more secure you get in a job. Even if you're not happy, it's really hard.
Yeah, I convinced myself that being able to do stuff like this on a whim, drive down to Utah, go to the Renaissance Fair, interview you, like come to stuff like, I just convinced myself it's just not possible. It's what some other people do. It's not what I do. I have signed up for something different. But my whole life, like I remember my mission president, he's like, what are you going to do? Like kind of my exit interview at the end of my mission. He said, what are you going to do? I was like, well, I'm going to go into engineering. He's like, what? I was like, yeah. He's like, you are way too creative for engineering. And he knew me just as a missionary. And I was like, I'm good at math. I'm good at chemistry. It pays well. That's what I'm going to do. And he just kind of was like, yeah, I don't know. And I knew what he was talking about because I do have this this super creative side of me that there's creative things in engineering and problem solving, but it's not this.
So you're blessed to have kind of both sides working.
Cursed and blessed, I think. Yeah, I'm sort of cursed with too many interests.
You channel that and it'll serve you well.
I think that if you can understand how to play them off of each other.
Yeah.
Like it took me a long time, I think, to get recognized at ExxonMobil for the weird approach that I take to things. Because for first 5-6 years, people were just kind of like, yeah, this guy's a bit different. Yeah. And then the last, funny enough, like I kind of went out on top. I'd never been kind of ranked better and held in better regard by management than when I quit just barely. And it's because they finally just started to go, okay, this guy's got a totally different approach, but we kind of like this and it works. It took a decade to kind of convince Exxon that that's the way I do it. And then I also write stories the way I engineer. I tell people I write myself into a corner on purpose, and then I'll problem solve my way out of it.
To me, so writing is problem solving.
Wow, that's interesting.
So that's, if I can, which is kind of a different way of writing, but.
See, I started kind of a fantasy novel just because I'm so curious about the process.
Yep.
Not that it will be good at all, but I'm fascinated by what you do. And I just wondered, I wanted to see how it compared to, the visual creativity. Right. And I hear authors talk about, characters taking on a life of their own, storyline. Yeah,
When did you do that?
I'm still working on it.
Really?
Yeah. So it's actually based on a painting that I did called Suburbia. So it's a bizarre thing. But anyway, it's been an interesting process. I don't know that I'll ever finish it even, but
because that's the thing, I look at painting and just think like it's black magic. I don't know how to be able to have an image in your head and to put it down on paper. I don't. Like if I look at something, like growing up, I had X-Men cards, and I would look at the X-Men characters, and I would draw them, and I can copy pretty well. But if I'm going to pull it out of my brain,
I don't pull everything out of my brain. I mean, the ideas come, and then if I want a certain degree of realism, I can't do all that out of my head. I mean, I can paint a person, I can paint a tree, but to have it really come alive, it's stupid actually not to refer to
like a model,
what's really, the real thing. And so I get models and props and costumes and go on location and, all this stuff to help me. So that by the time I start painting, I have a pretty good idea.
So what's funny is that kind of ties back into, I'll give you like an introduction so I can put it the first of the podcast, but this ties into one of my first points I wanted to bring up with you. So here with Greg Olsen, world famous painter, born in small town Idaho, painted from early on, from kind of what I gathered, elementary school age, always had supportive family, even when you made a mess of things, and which is awesome. And then you attended school at Utah State University, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have your paintings obviously all over the world in major corporations, in the Pentagon. They're in every church I think I've ever walked into in my entire life the world over. We have some in our house. We've got a couple with your signature on them. And you said you had 6 kids and how many? 15 now grandkids?
14
grandkids. And this is the relation is some of your grandkids are my nieces and nephews. So I don't know what relation that makes you to me. There's probably through 2 marriages.
Some of my grandkids are
my nieces and nephews.
Oh yeah, okay. So that's through.
So Jill's brother's wife is your daughter. So there you go. So that makes us, I don't know what that makes us. It makes us something. It makes twice removed.
Yeah. I've always felt a connection.
There it is. There it is. That's all it took. It was a couple marriages and a couple of kids. But this is, so when you talk about using the model, so this relates back. So I've done a couple of school visits. I just sent out 25 emails to all the schools in Billings. I love doing school visits. I love getting in front of kids and talking to them. So I remember back in the Rock Canyon days when you came and did school visits, right? And I've actually said this to some of the schools that I went and visited. I said, look, I remember being in your shoes because I remember when a really famous painter came in. I was sitting on the hard carpet, Indian style, looking up at this painter. And he came and he was showing some of his paintings. And the thing that has stuck with me since then, since I was 7, 8 years old, because Bryn was in my grade. Gosh. And you show these pictures, you show these paintings, and some of the kids in the neighborhood were the models for the paintings. Like Chandler Smoot, I think was one. I think Daniel Jensen. Guys, I haven't seen them in 30 years. And I remember thinking, what? Like, I want to be in a painting. Are you kidding me? That is so. That was the coolest concept that I could look over and see a kid and look at the painting in some fantastical situation, and there the kid was. So when I go to schools, when the kids ask questions, I have a little prize wheel that I spin. So kids ask questions, I write their names down. I have a little prize wheel they spin, and then when they come down, one of the prizes on the prize wheel is to get their name in the next book.
Oh, that's a cool
And the
thing.
reason the reason where that started, that idea came from, is it went back to your paintings. It goes like, what is the coolest thing I could give a kid? When I come visit them, it's like, it's include them in my work. Because they see this thing, this book or this painting or this whatever else. And I was like, to me, like so many of my decisions in life, it's just like, what would I think is cool if I was in their shoes? Some of that hasn't changed. Like I look around this room, and it's like some of those things I think in your head hasn't changed. Like the swing from the ceiling.
Yeah,
right. That's just
True.
a cool thing. Like why do you want it there? Because it's cool. For no other reason than it's just awesome.
Block this light. When I look at you, I'm seeing that window, and it's just making me squint.
Oh.
I can block a little bit of that.
Get a couple of them.
Creative. That's funny.
See, that has stayed with me forever. And I mean, part of what I don't nearly have a room, obviously, like this, but I have like, I was walking up to my front door one day, and I looked over, and we have 2 big sandstone blocks leading up to our front door, and I was like, Jill, you know what one of those needs? She's like, what? I was like, Excalibur. So I rented a drill. I bought an Excalibur sword.
Serious?
I drilled 14-inch core out of it, and I cemented. So up on our front walkway is Excalibur, just cemented into the sandstone block. People are like, why'd you do that? And I was like, because it's awesome. Because I don't need any other excuse other than that. It's just an awesome thing. I built a secret door to our storage room.
Really?
So I wanted this, like that. Seeing that secret door, that blows mine out of the water. But I didn't know how to build one. But I just like looked up how to do it, and I kind of modified some plans. And it's a superhero weapons case. So it's got Captain America's shield, and it's got all the Ninja Turtle weapons.
Oh my god!
These are legit weapons. It's got Iron Man's core. It's got a sword from Legend of Zelda and Wolverine's claws. And you pull on the nunchuck.
That's awesome.
And then it rolls in. And everyone's thinking it's going to be like, oh, what's behind there? It's like my sleeping bag and my food storage. And I was like, why? Why would you do that? And I was like, because it's awesome.
Because it's awesome.
And that's why I look around this room and I just see that same like mindset. It's like, why would you have this? And it's like, just because these were the thoughts that I thought were cool when I was a kid, and they haven't changed.
That's so true. That is so true. I realized early on, I can't swing without like smiling or laughing. Now I laugh because it's so goofy. I can wave to my neighbors as I'm coming back.
The family just hears the laugh. Oh, Dad's up.
Yeah, when I die, I think it's going to be because I do a backflip out of that thing and just,
It's so cool. Well, and that was one of the things too. I was so excited to when I moved back to Montana. So when we first moved to Houston, I didn't have any money, but we had a house. And then we moved to Australia. We started to get a bit of money because we were an expat assignment, but we were renting a house, so I couldn't do much to it. So moving to Montana was the first time that I had a house and I had some money, and so I just started looking around like, what can I do to this place? So my wife, she always says like, oh, so you've taken over this room as well? Because I keep putting stuff up, and posters, And I was like, I don't know.
Get in here.
I tell the kids when I go to school, I said, there's an imagination switch in everyone's brain, and mine's just stuck in the on position. I just don't stop thinking. I just kind of look at stuff and go, I could do something with that. And sometimes I pull it off, and sometimes I don't. But
well, yeah, it's a curse and a blessing.
I think so. I think in a lot of ways, and I just felt it was torture. I think at work, even though I enjoy work a lot, I enjoy the people I work with.
That's when it's a curse. Is when you have because of whatever situation you're in, there's not an outlet for it, or that kind of outlet that you would really like to.
So take me through like the starving student days, or the malnourished newlyweds to this room. Like what was that like? Was there any times where you're like, you know what, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to back out because this is not working?
Not really. And I think if I have something going for me, that was it. I was just either naive enough to think that it was always possible, and somehow I could do it. So I never really considered anything else. One time, we were living in Arizona. I was doing Western art. The house was going into foreclosure. Nothing was selling. It was just a real dry spell. We had one extra bedroom that was converted into my studio. It was like a 10 by 10 little room.
Yeah.
And bills were coming due, and probably Sid had just gone to the mailbox and found more things due. And she poked her head into the studio and she said, like, Greg, do you think maybe you ought to think about like getting a real job?
Right.
And I couldn't argue with her because it was really tough. And so we we got in the car and drove over to Fry's grocery store and bought a newspaper. That's how you looked for jobs in
Back
those
then,
days.
yeah.
And we brought it home, laid it out on the family room floor, and started going through the want ads. And really, after about 20 or 30 minutes, Sid was like, "You're not really qualified for anything, are you?"
We got all our eggs in this one
Yeah,
basket.
exactly.
Better make this work.
And so she said, "Well, just get back in there and paint something that'll sell."
Yeah.
You know, I had to humble myself, and we ended up calling Sid's dad and asking if we could borrow some money to make two house payments. I think that is what they were asking for. Anyway, and that kind of saved the farm, saved the house, and then finally something sold. Over the next year, we paid my father-in-law back with interest, and that was really probably the scariest time.
And how old were you? Was it you had kids then, or?
We did. We had 3 kids.
Wow.
And I'd quit my job a few years before. It was in the art realm. I was an in-house illustrator for a place in Salt Lake. And I did that for about a year and a half. And are we doing this?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it's going.
We're
I keep peeking down on it and it's going.
okay,
Yeah, so
this is real. Okay.
Yeah, it's live.
Well, and I had a friend come to me. This was, again, we'd been married about a year and a half. And this guy came to me, and we were actually missionary companions.
Okay.
And he said, "Greg, if you could do whatever you wanted to do, what would that be?" And I said, "I'd really like to just do my own thing. I was an okay employee, but I always kind of wanted to just do my stuff and not always have it be assignments." And he asked me, "Okay, how much is your car payment?" And I said, "Our car's paid for, thankfully." This was Sid's car. I'd sold mine when we got married. So the car was paid for. Our rent was a couple $100 a month. And he said, "You know what? It is never going to get any easier than right now."
Yeah.
So if you want to do that, he says, you don't have a whole lot to lose. And he was right. I mean, I wasn't making very much money. And so anyway, I went in and quit my job, and we decided we'd have an art show to kick off my new freelance career. And this same fellow this friend who had encouraged me to jump out on my own, his father was a well-to-do doctor on Walker Lane in Salt Lake, a really nice area. And they volunteered to host an art show for me. So I framed up all my old college art assignments, and I painted for a couple of months. We had enough to live for about 2 months. And I painted like crazy and got an art store to borrow us frames, on a speculative basis. If these don't sell, we'll bring them back.
Yeah.
And we had an art show. We splurged, and we printed nice invitations, and we had nice refreshments. And this family, they were great. I'm sure they got on the phone and called all their friends and say, "You don't have to buy anything, just show up," so the kid doesn't feel too bad. And so they had a good crowd there that night. But we sold enough that evening to pay for our nice refreshments and our nice invitations.
That was
it. Yep. So then I went into a deep depression for a week, like, oh my gosh, what have I done? And but then after a week, somebody called who had been to the show and said, "I didn't really like anything you had there, but would you consider a commission?" So that got us by, and literally for the next 10 years, it was kind of paint one, sell one.
Wow. So what took after 10 years? Did it just kind of build enough momentum?
A lot of things happened. I mean, we actually moved to Arizona. I was trying to get in on the Western art scene that was big at the time in the 80s.
Yeah, I noticed you painted a bunch of cowboy stuff.
Yeah, so I was doing that, and along the way, lots of people have been helpful and generous and helped open doors for us. There's never like a magic key that just everything's wonderful from then on. But what happened after a decade or so is that I got into doing prints of my work. so that then that would subsidize the sales of the originals.
Right.
It wasn't just paint one and hope that it sells. I could, multiply my efforts so that when you're just in the original market, the only real advertising you get is what, stuff that you print and send out, advertise in a magazine or whatever, or the originals themselves hanging over someone's sofa or fireplace. Doing prints really multiplied that effect, and so you could get things in multiple areas. And that kind of changed, the game a bit. I got a publisher who I knew I wanted to move in that area, and so I was trying to find a good publisher, and I created, I think, 21 slide portfolios. Back in those days, there was no internet or anything like that, so I had slide portfolios with maybe, 15 slides in them of some of my work, and I sent them out to all the best publishers I could find in America. And I think I got back 19 nice no thank you letters, and the other two didn't bother to respond.
Yeah, I've been there, done that.
So again, I tried to save some money, and I published 8 of my own images, had them printed myself and stored them in my basement. And printing them is the easy part. Getting rid of them is the hard part. So I had these big stacks of prints in my basement.
Funny the parallels between writers and painters.
I have a whole library of my own books. So I did that for a couple of years, tried to promote those, and we did things like I went to the Tokyo International Art Show. We heard the Japanese are really hot for American art, and well, they weren't so hot for my art. Anyway, my wife went to the New York Art Expo, and we had a display there. And while she was there, the president of one of the publishing companies that a few years before I'd sent a portfolio to came by and saw some of my new stuff. And long story short, we ended up signing a deal with them. And we also got approached by Thomas Kincaid's publishing company, and we went out and saw his operation, and they were asking about printing for us. But we decided to go with a place called Mill Pond Press, who was one of the 2 top publishers in the United States, and I was with them for 13 years, and it was a really good experience.
So out of the stuff you paint today, how much of it is commission work and how much of it is I just want to sit down and paint something?
Just a small percentage is commission work. I never say never, but the thing about commission work is it's usually really specific to the people commissioning it.
Right.
Like, here's an example. The last person who asked me to do a commission that I didn't do was a prominent family. They actually are somehow associated with that big white Park City barn as you come into town.
Yep.
Their family owns this, and this family, they have like 40 grandkids or something, and they wanted a family portrait with Jesus in front of that Park City barn.
If he's coming, that's where
everybody wants one of those.
Everyone wants a second coming in their backyard.
It was overwhelming, kind of, with that many people in it. And anyway, so I'm sure they would have, it'd be cool for your own family, but that's about as far as the interest goes on an image like that. So I usually kind of do my own thing, but once in a while a project sounds interesting, and if it's something that they'll allow me to do in a way that I think could be interesting to other people, I'll take it on.
So are you selling originals still, or is a lot of it just prints you're putting out there?
If one thing I've kind of, if I were to make an improvement in the business side of what I do now, it would be to pay more attention to the originals. I've been really focused for so many years on the print market. I'm not in any galleries right now with my originals, and they tend to, trickle out. Most of them, end up in private collections around, but I don't really actively market them. I market
Right.
the prints. And on our website, we have a little section that talks about originals, but you just have to, call to get more information.
And how many do you do a year?
Well, it depends. I've
You
done
do
as
some
many.
big, ginormous.
Yeah, I mean, I've done as many as 30 or 40 in a year.
Oh, wow.
But those would be smaller, and that's, that was before I had a family and stuff like
Right.
that. And
Turn away.
yeah, but yeah, now I'm doing somewhat larger things, and I may only do half a dozen a year, sometimes more.
Okay.
It just depends on how complex. The research part of it always takes a chunk of time. And
So I'm sure inspiration comes from all over the place, but is there like, you just see something one day and, oh man, I gotta paint that, or you jot that down, or how does it come?
yeah, all that. I have a little notebook when an idea comes. I do a little thumbnail sketch, or I make some notes to remind me of it, or somebody will just give me an idea. It just it can come from anywhere. Sometimes you wake up with an idea in your head, and sometimes they just kind of percolate even for years. Sometimes, like, okay, I've got this idea, but I don't know exactly how it's.
And from the thing you see in your head to begin with to what's final on paper, is it drastically different? Does it depend? Is it usually pretty spot on?
Depends. Sometimes it's really close. Other times it evolves. Like I had one I did years ago. Some people might be familiar with it. It's called "Be Not Afraid." It's Jesus helping he's got a child in one arm,
Yep.
and he's reaching down to another child. They're crossing this tumultuous stream.
Yep.
That idea came just kind of in a flash to me one day, but I saw it. I mean, it's representative of him helping us through the difficult times of life. The stream represents the hard times we go through, and he kind of knows the safe passage. Well, I originally saw it in my mind as him helping a couple, a man and wife, or a man and woman. And then when I started to actually sketch that out, it looked kind of silly. They didn't look helpless enough. So I decided to substitute children to kind of represent our comparative helplessness. So first it comes as an idea. I do thumbnail sketches and try to work out a general composition, and then I try to pick one that's the strongest, and then from that I'll do sort of a little cartoonish drawing that's a little more detailed with representing the figures and kind of the perspective and the angle and all of that, maybe even some lights and darks. And when I get that down, then I go into the next phase, which is using that as a template to collect reference, models, props, costumes, background, all of that stuff. And that's that involves bringing people to the studio as models. It involves going out on location sometimes.
You've been somewhere like with a bunch of people dressed up in the middle of some park.
Yes, that is a weird.
taking pictures.
That is a weird experience. Yeah, somebody, dressed up like Jesus.
In the middle of some
running
stream
through.
up
That
South
actually
Fork.
happened. Yes, it was up Rock Canyon in Provo, and yeah, that is kind of a weird deal. The weirdest though happened when we had just moved to Provo. I had an idea for a painting. I'd been to Israel, and I had a location that I really liked. And I was really excited to get started on this piece. It's one where Jesus is feeding some little birds.
Yep.
He's kind of in a courtyard. Anyway, leaving Arizona, I'd also left all my models, my go-to.
Right.
When I do Jesus, I've actually used 10 or 12 different models as kind of a starting point. But
Your Jesus friends?
my Jesus friends.
Don't shave your beard,
Yes,
man.
That's right. Yeah.
I got a painting
Yeah,
coming up.
don't do it yet. I didn't know anybody here, and I thought, like, I'm Norwegian, like the worst possible model for Jesus you could find. But I thought I could pose just for the body, and then it was going to be a profile, and they're a little easier to do out of your imagination, not as complex as anyway. So I decided to dress myself up as Jesus. And I had a mustache at the time. This is 89 or something like that. And I set up a tripod in my little basement studio at the time, and I had a timer on it, and I had a mirror so I could like check my pose and take pictures of myself. And after just a few photos, I realized, you are really an awful model. I gotta create a little better profile. So I got this idea. I ran up into Sid's sewing closet, and I found some quilt batting. And I got it, and I glued it onto my face, and then I painted it dark, and then I really looked bizarre. I had this shawl over my head and these robes and sandals on, but it kind of gave me, if you squinted your eyes, you kind of got a little better profile.
Paint with your squint.
Yes, exactly. So I was the only one at home. I'd locked the front door because I didn't want anybody to come home and see me. So I'm dressed up in this getup, and the doorbell rings, and I look at my watch, and it's about time for the kids to be home from school. So I thought, I've locked them out. So dressed like this, quilt batting on my face, I run to the front door, and I open it and look, and instead of my kids on the porch, I see this woman I've never seen before. She has a welcome basket for the new family that's moved into the neighborhood,
Just turns.
And she just went, welcome to the neighborhood. She just about fell off the porch. And so right off the bat, I was this weird, eccentric guy who moved into the neighborhood.
That was your house up in Indian Hills?
Yeah. So I try to do better at getting reference than that occasion, but sometimes that's
awesome.
Where it starts. So now that I've ruined that painting for everyone who's familiar with it.
Was that actually what you painted it off of?
That's actually what I painted.
Really?
Yeah. I really had to use my imagination on the head.
That is awesome. That's perfect. It's the perfect story. So what did you use for your definition of success? Have you always considered yourself successful? Was there a moment where you kind of stopped and looked back and was like, you know what, I've actually kind of made it. I don't know when it happened, but I made it.
You know what? It hasn't changed that much, in the sense that even when I had no money, I was still doing what I loved to do. My day, as I look, it's really funny because it was essentially the same as it is now, just doing what I loved to do. It's certainly nicer to not worry as much about, the car payment or food or stuff like that. But, so much of it is just in your head, where you live every day. You can spend a lot of time worrying about stuff like that, or I think even then I was able to just see myself continuing to do this and enjoying it and pursuing a passion that I was really into. And so I'm thankful that I was doing something that brought me a lot of enjoyment, even in the difficult times. And I tried, there's different kinds of pressure. Early on, it's pressure to, kind of get some exposure or get people to just slow down long enough to take a look at what you're doing, or, find the next avenue that would feed your family. And then there's phases where now it's pressure to do another painting that's as popular as the last one, or that will be popular because your last one was a flop,
Right.
and so you can get caught up in all kinds of stuff like that, and I found you kind of can't pay too much attention to criticism or praise, because they can both mess you up. Just do what feels good inside and makes you happy, and I think out there somewhere is at least a handful of people who will kind of resonate with that. So
no, that's really good. That's really profound. There's an author, Brandon Mull, who writes Fablehaven, some other books. And I was listening to him. When was it? It was either this year or last year. I was at this LTUE, this symposium in Provo, and he said, when you're starting out, it feels a lot like you're throwing your own birthday party, because you're telling people like, "Hey, come, be excited!"
That's right.
And you're the one hanging the decorations, and you're the one sending the
That's
invites.
right.
And everyone's like,
That's right.
"Why should I be excited about your birthday party?" And you're like, "No, it's gonna be really cool." and you're trying to just convince people to come and be excited about what you do.
Yeah.
So has there been, I mean, like, Oh Jerusalem, has there been like a core group of paintings that are your most, and are the ones that are the most popular the ones that are usually the most important to you, or do you know when something's going to strike a chord? You're like, oh, this one's going to do really well.
Sometimes you know, I mean, or at least you feel like, I accomplished what I set out to, but then you never know how it will be received. The O Jerusalem piece is kind of a signature piece.
Yeah.
People maybe are familiar with that, but it's funny, times change. My daughters all come to me now and go, Dad, those colors are so like 80s. You gotta get with it, and
I'm painting Jesus. Okay, it's 2,000 years ago.
So
the eternal colors.
But that is stuff, like it or not, that at least you should be aware of, whether you focus on that or not. If you're trying to feed your family, it also can't all be about me and just what I want to do. I can do that, but I have to realize that I may pay the price for that I might be, the only one that really thinks this is awesome. So you do listen a little. I say you don't listen to criticism or praise, but you can't be unaware of it. You kind of have to weigh it.
Do you get that just from a core group of people that you trust?
Yeah, probably. Like if you start reading all the comments on Facebook and stuff, there's some really encouraging and nice ones. But there's also stuff that you'll read, and the negative ones are the ones that you tend to remember.
Yeah.
And they mess you up, and I'm dealing in subject matter, at least with the Christian art, that is really delicate territory.
Yeah.
People already have really strong feelings about, if they believe in Christ, they kind of already have an image of what he's like. And if you don't get in the ballpark or along that spectrum that they resonate with, the gates of hell open and they let you know.
It's funny. I went through and I read probably for 15 minutes just comments on your Facebook page.
Oh, yeah.
And very interesting. Like, a lot of people will write prayers.
Yeah,
in their comments.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's like they're talking to Jesus
yeah,
on your Facebook page.
Yeah, amen, hallelujah.
Yeah, amen. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of like, hey, this person reminds me of my brother who died 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And like, what a impactful career. Like, no one was coming up to me like, Mike, thank you so much for making the gas that goes in my car because I could get to point A to point B and I had to get to my dad in the hospital. No one's telling me that as a chemical engineer, but people are, man, it seems like it's really hitting home with some people, all of your work. And
well, you also get the other side where, I've had people dust their feet on my website and just, say you're going to hell for commercializing something that is so, and so I'm sensitive to that. Certainly was never my intent. I never even set out to be a Christian artist. It was always something I did on the side just for my own personal satisfaction. No one bought it. No one would carry it in galleries. No one would publish it. That's why I say I was doing the Western art and sort of family themes, a lot of stuff with my kids in
Christmas
it. Christmas
stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then my publisher kind of went out on a limb. Somebody was looking at old slides of some of my past work and found the one that I had posed for myself and said, I don't know, we're Christian and, maybe we should try it. So they did, and it found an audience, and it kind of took on a life of its own. And so, but it's a strange area to delve into because it's so personal to people. And, my intent would never be to offend someone. And so I tell people, these are just like symbols of him, just reminders. And if they resonate with you, great. If they don't, just let them go. And certainly never meant to commercialize it. But I think it's like spiritual music. There's a play for some people. It can be an uplifting reminder. At least I hope so. And that's really my intent, not to put something on your wall to worship or whatever, but if that, if he's important to you, maybe this can be a reminder. And if it just does that, then maybe it serves its purpose.
Yeah, the whole sensitive audience thing is something I'm becoming more and more aware of with writing, and it seems like it's changed so much in the last 5-10 years. What I've run into with writing a lot, it hasn't, hopefully, I mean, I'm not big enough for people to even care about this, but a lot of it's like, why isn't there, the proper balance of male and female and this ethnicity or this lifestyle or this belief system? And it's like, look, I understand that everyone has their things and everyone has their causes, but my cause might not be your cause. And the purpose of my work is not to be some demographic representation of something going on in the world today. It's the cool stories that I have in my head. I can write from what I know. I can try and experiment with things, but I just want to put a cool story out that people are going to enjoy.
Yeah.
That's, I'm not the next Shakespeare, but I do have a crazy imagination, and I can put together some things.
Yeah.
And as you said, hopefully people enjoy it and resonate with it. Do you talk about your daughters telling you to use updated colors and stuff. Are you trying new things, or have you got to a point where you're like, you know what? I know how to do this. I know it works, and I'm good at it, and I'm just going to keep producing.
I'm trying some new colors. I try, and then, believe it or not, as we moved into this new house, my wife said, I don't know, how do I put this? We had a lot of images of Jesus, my images in the last house. And sometimes those pictures don't exactly match the sofa.
Can you paint a picture of Jesus that will match this sofa, please?
So I've been doing some more contemporary things just for fun, just for us. Yeah. Even some abstract stuff.
Really?
Just to see, just to give some color to our home. So
do you have anyone else's paintings up that aren't yours?
Yeah, I have some. I'm going to have a collection. We don't have everything up yet in our home because we haven't decided what we want. But yeah, I like to collect other artists' work. I enjoy viewing that more than my own. It's just that I have more access to my own than others. So yeah, it's always refreshing to, every artist I learn something from, and it's exciting to. I'd love to collect more from other artists. Yeah.
So this leads into something. So I was reading this book on creativity, and this guy says, it's called The Creative Curve, and he says that he interviewed all these world famous, artists and musicians and writers and whatever else. And he said every really successful creative has these 4 people in their life. So I'm going to read some of these definitions, and I want to know whether you have these 4 people.
I might not be really creative.
Yeah.
I'll probably.
I was reading through this, and I was like, man, I'm missing a lot of these. Maybe that's why I'm not nearly as successful as I want to be.
Okay.
So the first one is what he calls a conflicting collaborator. So that's kind of like the yin to your yang. It's like your co-partner. It's like someone who, what he says is, everyone has flaws. In order to make them non-fatal, you need to find a person or a group whose individual traits compensate for your flaws.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it's your friends, your buddies.
That's my wife.
Okay.
Right there. Yeah, she is.
Keeps you honest and.
Yeah, and probably the only person that her criticism is the one that just gets me. She has, because I know she's usually right. And it's you mentioned the O Jerusalem painting.
Yeah.
That painting was one that was inspired by a visit to the Mount of Olives, and there was a spectacular sunset that night. And I came home and I tried to recreate Jesus on the Mount of Olives with my sunset. And I finished the painting, and it was a fantastic painting of a beautiful sunset with the little guy down here.
Right.
And Sid came in and said, Greg, that's a wonderful painting of a sunset. And you really ought to think about, anyway, like I was kicking over the garbage can and stuff, and I was depressed for 3 days, and
how long
then
did
I
it
realized
take you to do the painting?
I spent a couple months on it, and then I spent a couple more weeks fixing it after I sanded off the sky to read it. But it was the right thing.
Yeah.
I changed the whole lighting so that then he was the focus instead of the sunset. So, in that way, she's always a great balance, and she she might wait until I'm finished before she gives me her opinion, which I wish she would, step in a little sooner. But
Involve your conflicting collaborator earlier in the process. Note to self.
So we are so different, but it has been a good thing to
Okay.
have that.
So you definitely
balance.
have that.
Yeah.
The master teacher. So this is an expert in your field. You're kind of like his or her apprentice in a way. This is a person who teaches you the patterns and formulas of your craft or industry to ensure that you create things with the right level of familiarity while also giving you feedback you need to hone your craft through deliberate practice, et cetera, et cetera.
I actually had a little cluster of those.
Yep.
One was my high school art teacher, who I had for 4 years, who just was outstanding. He went through a difficult time in his life, a divorce, and he actually ended up living with my family my senior year.
Holy cow.
So I couldn't be a slacker in his class. I had an older cousin who was also a student of this same teacher. He became a professor of art at BYU, Idaho, and we lived in the same neighborhood, and he was a great mentor. And then I went on to Utah State and had some great professors there who would bring in professional artists from around the world to give assignments and then give us critiques. So it was kind of this, almost like a panel of mentors that were so helpful to me.
Okay. So there you go, 2 for 2. This next one's interesting. They call it the modern muse. So the modern muse is a life of creativity often involves getting your soul slapped around. You need to surround yourself with people who will motivate you and inspire you to persevere. It can be a source of fresh ideas or even friendly competition to push you towards achieving your very best work.
That one's a little more difficult because, without really meaning to, I'm sort of not a recluse, but I'm not really part of the art scene as much as, and I kind of miss that. And so sometimes it happens vicariously. I follow artists on their websites and stuff like that. And so that's actually something I feel a little bit lacking in, just because of my personality. Without being married to my wife Sid, I could be much more introverted than I am. She just drags me along. But so I kind of do that. I mean, there's some wonderful young artists out there who I've actually met. 2 of them, Joseph Bricky and Howard Lyon, are 2 very talented artists that I met when they were in high school, and they brought their work to me, and it was amazing then. And I was, like, hey, keep it up, buds. You're gonna do well. Well, they've far surpassed me now in their abilities. It's really fun to see that, and I follow them online and see what they and I'll still see them on occasion at events, or Howard, gone out to dinner with he and his wife and stuff, and so
they do Christian stuff, or what's their?
Yeah, some of them. Yeah, both of them do some of that along with other things. Joe has actually a school he works with. He's done stuff for the Rome Temple and others and murals. So is Howard. He's done murals in the Gilbert, Arizona
That's crazy. So I lived right where they built the Rome Temple. I lived on
is that right?
Yeah. There's a little villa there, 4-story villa. We had our own Olive Grove, pizza, wood-burning pizza.
Yeah, right.
So we knew the temple was going to be there eventually. But,
wow.
But yeah, then when they actually announced it when I was offshore. So I came in. I've been offshore for a week. My phone was just lit up with messages, and I was like, "What is it?" Everyone's like, "That's crazy!" They weren't saying what it was. I was like, "What happened?" And then then I saw they announced the temple way back when. But all right, so that's you got to. And then this is the one. This is the big one that I'm lacking. Prominent promoter. So it says to be creative success, you need to be recognized as one. A prominent promoter already has credibility and is willing to share it with you. Not only does this benefit you, it also benefits the promoter. So like, a stand-up comedian might have an opening act, right? They sort of lend some of their credibility or their fame or something to you, or at least they just recognize you and prop you up in front of the world to see.
Yeah. Well, because I'm not in a gallery any longer, it's a little different, and I'm not with my publisher anymore. I'm self-published. So my son has taken over the role as, marketer and promoter. Nate does a good job at that. But I think outside of that, some of my collectors have been very helpful, and some of them are prominent
Sure.
people in their communities and business and in their own fields, and they've been very generous in referring my work or giving exposure to their collections. They've been helpful in just their patronage, giving me the opportunity to do some of the things that I wanted to do. So, without naming them all, there's been some very helpful people in that arena that I have to thank, and I'll always be grateful to them. Just very good and generous people. So, but yeah, what you talk about, that's really true, and that's probably another area that I feel I could do better in, and it's kind of awkward if you are a self-promoter.
Yep.
If you're not, P.T. Barnum or something like that, it's hard to. That's not in my nature.
Right.
It helps a little bit to have, I've distanced myself as far as my son, running, and one of my daughters, Kylie, she helps in the business too. But I think it's kind of awkward for them a little bit, just to say, hey, my dad is, all that stuff.
It's a weird thing, and I'm self-published, and that's one of the, I don't have the backing of any sort of corporation that's pushing my stuff out. I'm having to find ways of. I think I give good school presentations, and so I try to get out in front of a lot of kids. But I'm here in town doing this Renaissance fair. I'm going to be yelling at people in a bad British accent for 2 days. Stuff
well, that's cool.
Yeah. I love doing it, but I crunch the numbers as I'm driving down here. I'm like, unless I sell a lot of books, this is not even going to be worth it. But it's, it's one of those things I want to be able to, number one, I want to be able to do what I want to do. I've been told what to do and what processes to follow and what procedures. If I wanted to follow those, I'll go back to being an engineer, right?
Well, the internet has kind of changed, and social media have changed that paradigm a little bit, in that now it's actually possible to have those people become part of that promotional force.
Sure.
Their voices are heard as they network, and I have to hand it to, again, my kids, who are much more tech savvy and social media savvy than I am. And there's certainly people who have a greater following than I do in lots of it.
You've got a decent following.
I think there's like 1 million followers now.
I just checked last night.
And so, that is crazy to me. Like, where do these people live? I don't know. Yeah. So, sometimes I can't really fathom that. But, I thank them actually, for just being the force that they are, and the positive comments that we get, and they help perpetuate in an unusual way that hasn't always been available to people starting.
Has it just really taken off the last couple of years, the sort of social media side of it? Or?
Probably in the last 5 years. Yeah, we never really pushed social media before that too much, and maybe that'll all evaporate next year. Who knows?
Was it one of your kids' ideas that kind of came up with that, or did they say,
well,
Dad, I think
I'd always been thinking about it, but I never really had, the savvy to know how to do it. Nate is pretty savvy. He follows the algorithms and all that, and he figures a lot of things out, and he's just aware in that area in a way that I wouldn't be. And so, that's where if you're not a super self-promoter yourself, if that's just not your thing, if you don't have an amazing drive to be a salesperson, you really do. You need someone at least to promote, because I'm kept busy in the creative process. It's really difficult to do both. I'll go out and do speaking engagements, do little fireside kinds of
Right.
things and talk about my work, and that's fun, and that's kind of part of it. I'll do signings and things like that, but that's about as far as my influence.
How much do you paint a day?
Well, when
You
I've
have
got
a
a
set
piece on the
schedule?
easel, I try to make it kind of like business hours.
Yeah.
Get out here in the morning and paint, stop for lunch, and come back and work till dinner.
So this is an odd idea or sort of worry that I have in my head. If I was a painter, I would be terrified of screwing up my signature. Because it seems like you can correct little things along the way, but your signature, you got one shot at it, right? And people are staring at you. Because I screwed up my signature signing a book, And I was like, if he screws up that signature, do you get nervous over weird stuff like that?
Actually, I always wait till that corner of the painting is dry. And then when I paint my signature in, if I mess it up, I can just wipe it off. Yeah, you can't erase and paint over, but yes, that's the most fun though, is to finally sign your name.
That's got to be a really good feeling for months
Yeah.
of pouring over a painting to be able to sign it.
Yeah.
But I've had kids yell to me like, spell your name, and because I'm horrible with things, and they'll spell it out to me, and I'll still get it wrong.
I know.
It has some weird spelling and something, and I'll put it, and they're like, I said E, and I was like, oh.
Yeah,
right,
I know.
Yeah.
See, that's worse if you're signing in pen. One time I was signing a print. We were doing Costco road shows.
Yeah.
Somebody had me sign a print they'd just purchased. But out of the corner of my ear, I was listening to their conversation, and they were talking about Thomas Kincaid, the painter. And I looked down, and I had written Thomas Kincaid on just like, hello. So they got a new print. Yeah,
Thomas
right.
Kincaid signed Greg Olsen painting.
Yeah. So sometimes other artists will do advertising for you.
I know there's some authors that I know of that they'll find each other's books in stores and sign it.
Yeah.
Like I'm Brandon Sanderson signing it for,
Exactly.
Imagine you get a copy of one of those, pull one of those off the shelf and work
Yeah,
something.
I have an arrangement with some other artists like
Yeah.
Simon Dewey, who people will bring one of his pieces up. This is my favorite piece I've ever, seen. Could you sign it? And I'll have to tell them it's not mine.
I can sign it.
Yeah,
That's what you
I
want.
can sign it.
Practice Simon's signature.
Yes,
And kind
yeah.
of give it wherever you want to.
His is perfect though. His is like printed. Anyway, like a Norman Rockwell.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time talking to me. This is like, this
it's
room is
fun.
a dream.
Well, I've really enjoyed being here. I don't know that it makes me paint any better. I think I was, my studio for a while. Oh, Jerusalem was painted in a windowless, unfinished basement with cobwebs and, little incandescent bulbs hanging from wires from the ceiling. And
Is there
stuff.
part of like being an artist and a creative that kind of like feeds off that and like
Maybe,
wants that,
just hunker down and yeah, maybe so. It's not a bad thing. My first studio was half of our baby's nursery. I built a petition right in the middle, like 7 feet high, and the crib was on one side, and I had a 4 by 8 foot cubicle on the other side that was my studio. And at night, I would put a quilt over the top so I could paint, and the light wouldn't get out and keep the baby awake. So I'd get just sweaty hot in there working it. And it was just a hole. It was like a clubhouse you built as a kid, So
I'll tell you, if I had your setup, I'll tell you what I'd do. I would put a hobbit hole in the backyard. That's
A what?
A hobbit hole.
Oh, there you
I
go.
would install a hobbit hole. So I've got this. That's my one big dream, and I found a company in Maine that does them.
Really?
Yeah, and they'll fly around and they'll install them, and they did. I actually called them this last week because we have this property down in Southern Utah in Beaver, and I told my father-in-law, I was like, Ken, we gotta install some hobbit holes down here, and he was like, well, that's an interesting idea. And I was like, yeah, we install them big enough that you could stay in them and have beds, because there's a farm in Tennessee that has them. They flew this company
Really?
down from Maine, installed these 3 hobbit holes. They got a couple beds in them, and they are so cool.
I'll have to talk to you more.
They're so
It's
cool.
funny you say that, because no kidding, we had this giant fiberglass window well insert, that we ended up not using, and it was laying out in the yard. And I said, you know what? We should just embed that back into this embankment in the backyard and put a door on it.
Yeah, that looks. I mean, you have the perfect backyard for it.
Yeah.
Perfect hobbit hole backyard. But we
an idea.
went to when we were in Australia for 3 years, we went over to New Zealand twice and got an RV and went around and saw all the Lord of the Rings film locations. And we went to Hobbiton, and that to me still is like in my darkest moment, in the refinery, or whatever. Just close my eyes and return to Hobbiton, because it's one of the few places you go there and you're like, this isn't just a movie set. I am here.
Yeah.
This is Hobbiton. Like, it's crazy. And they built it now. When they first built it for the Lord of the Rings movies, it was all styrofoam and whatever else. And then
And now-
with the Hobbit movies, it's all wood and stone, and you eat there, and it's just.
It's funny what
so
somebody's
incredible.
vision can turn into. I think
It's
of that.
crazy.
I've read Walt Disney's biography. It's just crazy. I mean, stuff like that. I think about Walt Disney going and trying to sell his idea. I got this great idea, this like whole kingdom, and it's all centered around this mouse.
Yeah, it's like people,
just
like the borderline
yeah,
between absolute insanity and genius is so fine, And like I'm actually listening to a couple different audiobooks as I'm driving around, and I was listening to the first Harry Potter as I was driving over here. And in the beginning of the book, the first opening chapter, it talks about everyone's all hush-hush about Harry Potter. And the book says, because Harry Potter was the boy that lived, it says, the whole world will know this boy's name. And I was like, how prophetic that was, Like, could she ever have dreamed? There's a theme park, and there's, movies, and it's just like, part of it, too, is when I was in engineering, people would always say, find someone who already has what you want, has already arrived at where you want to arrive at, then attach yourself to that person's hip and find out what they did. And I was kind of looking around ExxonMobil, and I was like, I don't see anyone here that I want to be. And when I first came in, it's like, I want to be a vice president. And then you get to know them, and you're like, nah, I don't want to be that. I like their money, but I wouldn't, I don't want to be them. And then I remember watching, I was at this symposium again in Provo, and it was James Dasher. So he's an author. He did Maze Runner, and he's got a bunch of movies now. He was talking about his books, and he goes, after this, I got to go down to South Africa. I have to do a cameo in the third movie. And I was like, I want that guy's life. I was like, that's who I want. And it wasn't like J.K. Rowling. It wasn't like somebody was like, no, this is a guy. He wasn't even an English major. He was out of BYU. He was an accountant. I was like, you're within reach, and what you have is incredible. And I look at people like you. I have this mental list of, here's people that are doing what they love to do. And the list is not long, but it's people who I think like have completely arrived, who have always kind of done, not really compromised. I mean, we all compromise in some respects, but and just get to do what they love. And I was like, those are the people that I want to be. I don't want to be an artist. I want to write and be creative and stuff. But like, this room represents, like, it's what it represents to me. It represents doing what you love and being surrounded with things that you think are awesome. It's like, what a better way to live.
Well, you made the right choice then. Just going for it.
Yeah, and conventional wisdom was like, well, don't go for it until your side gig makes you enough money. And I was like, it never will. I could spend 10 hours a week for 10 years, and I can never spin that plate fast enough to get it to go.
Yeah. And, everybody's got to figure that out themselves. There's different avenues, but for some, that really is the only way to do it. And, if you fail, it's not the worst thing in the world. You can start over, you can regroup, and,
I just had this, I've got my oldest brother, he's a chemical engineer, and he's hopped around to a bunch of different companies, and now he started his own company. He's done very, very, very well in oil and gas. And I kind of look at that, I'm like, man, wow, that's making a lot of money, getting a lot of stuff, but I'm very similar to him, but then I'm not. And, I don't know, I just kind of looked around a bunch, and I've always just kind of thought, I crunched the numbers. I left $10 million on the table by leaving Exxon. That's what I left over the next 25 years. It's $10 million. And it was guaranteed in the bank $10 million, And I just kind of, as I said, that's how I was raised. Like, you get your job, and then you just keep grinding away, and that's what you have. Then I was like, if 30 years from now I turn around and the only thing I have to look back on, there's definitely worse things in life, and it probably wouldn't be a bad life, but I was like, I would have sacrificed I don't know what I'm sacrificing, but it's like I would have sacrificed a whole life of creativity and of things that I could call my own, that were uniquely my own. And I was like, it was funny. I was talking to my psychologist brother, Steve, and he's like, Mike, if I was as passionate about anything as you are as passionate about writing, I don't know why you even, like, what's the question? What's stopping you?
Yeah.
And I was just kind of like, I don't know, golden handcuffs a bit, but.
And I think that's what determines it. If, I've never pushed my kids in anything really. I mean, I've tried to give them opportunities to,
Yeah.
head whatever direction turns them on. But for those who are really going to do something, I don't think anybody really has to push them. It's a passion that is so much a part of you, it just drives you even if other people are telling you can't do it. And so, I don't think you can force that on someone, but if they have it, they'll
Yeah, I
get
talk to kids about being productively obsessed. I was like, if you want to be successful in anything, you got to find something that you can be productively obsessed. You can be obsessed over stupid stuff that doesn't give you anything, but to be obsessed over something that's productive, it's like that's how you're successful. And to be honest, it took me a while. I knew I wanted to write, but then it was so hard, quote unquote, and I was so tired. And it took me years to kind of weed out the little extra things I did in the evenings, TV, video games, or whatever else, to where I was like, you know what? I'm going to come home, I'm going to write. And the worse work got, the harder I wrote in the evenings. Because the analogy was actually my work desktop background was Chateau d'If, was the prison that the Count of Monte Cristo, that Edmond Dantes stayed in, the Count of Monte Cristo. Because I felt like that's what my right half of the brain was. I would take my whippings every day, and then at night I would claw out just a handful of dirt in a direction that I didn't know where it led. Right? I was writing, that was another 700 words or 500 words, and it was just a handful of dirt. So my wife was like, "How are you doing?" I would just like hold up my handful of dirt, And I still don't know where it's leading. It could be leading to a cliff. It could be leading to freedom. It could be leading to another jail cell.
Yeah.
I don't.
But that focus is important. And sometimes, especially starting out, you have to get some momentum. You have to get some, in my field, you got to get some paintings behind you. You got to get a body of work that creates momentum in and of itself. And I remember a couple of years ago I had a painting that it was a big Christmas nativity piece, and it was large, and Deseret Book was doing a Christmas book, and they said, "You've got all these Christmas paintings, but you don't have a nativity. We need one, and we need it like by this deadline." And for this size painting, it was like out of reach for me. I had like 30 days to do this. And for me, the kind of painting I wanted to do for that subject matter, it just seemed impossible. So, but anyway, I started on March 15th, and I gridded out my painting. I took thread and taped it, and made a grid with 12 squares. And I said, I know I'm going to have to paint at least 12 hours a day. So I'd get up in the morning and I'd set a little timer for 1 hour, and I'd work 1 hour in this square. As soon as it went off, I'd move to the next one. And I did that for 12 hours. I was afraid I was going to get bogged down in one problem area. And then when I went beyond 12 hours, I just started over. So I did that every day for 30 days, and I averaged about 18 hours a day. But I finished it on April 14th that night, and it felt so good to sign my name, and I wasn't quitting early.
Did you screw up the signature?
Yeah, I was done. I'd actually,
holy cow.
And it was kind of a revelation to me, how much I could accomplish if I really got focused on it. It wasn't great for my family that week. I told them, this next month, I'm really sorry. Because I would just, come in, go to bed, and get up early the next morning. But it was kind of discouraging because I thought, geez, I could do 12 paintings like this next year if I spent that much time. But anyway.
Wow. And that's what I think creativity to me is being able to solve. I mean, I guess the problem that you had was I got to deliver this painting, and it's time, and it's not getting bogged down. So you devise this grid system, and being creative is just coming up with different solutions for the same problem.
Solve problems, yeah.
So people are, and that's what I think there's this, as I tell like school kids, I said there's the imagination portion of my brain, and there's the logical side of my brain. And I think it's the fusion of logic and imagination that's creativity to me. Because imagination is just like crazy stuff that might not work. Logic kind of grounds it a little bit, and then creativity is what makes it actually on paper or on canvas or for people to see is that fusion of logic and imagination. But being able to solve a problem many different ways, I think, is a mark of creativity. So that's.
And there is a certain amount of just labor involved. There's the creative part, but then somewhere along the way, you just got to, you have to put the hours in and do it. And it doesn't always feel like it's, oh, this is so wonderful.
Right.
Sometimes there's a battle built into it. There's a real struggle. But then there are times where, there are times I've got the music playing loud.
Right.
I've been in the swing, and now I'm in front of the canvas, and it's just like, man, I am like this is the most awesome thing I have ever. Yeah. So.
What music do you listen to when you paint?
I listen to all kinds of stuff. Even on some of this, like what people would think are sacred subject matter. If I'm really trying to get myself going, sometimes it's a little more upbeat than Tabernacle Choir stuff.
That's awesome.
But the whole gamut. It's great to have, Alexa now. You can just think of something that would go and
then you're off.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I use music as, I would call it mental bookmarks. Because I would come home from work and I'd put the kids to bed. It might have been some of the kids freaking out or whatever. And I get in bed, it's like, oh, and now I've got to go back and be in this mental space to write. And I was like, how do you do that? It took me for a long time because I used to not be able to listen to music as I wrote. It would be too distracting. Yeah. But now, I plug in and I listen to a lot of music that's, there are these bands that do a lot of music for movie trailers. And some of them are incredible. And so usually they don't have singing, they don't have any words.
Right.
But they're all instrumental stuff. And they're just really like epic, cool. You can conquer the world listening to this stuff. And that's what I kind of plug myself into. And then,
I find if I'm listening to music, I can go back to a painting, sometimes years later, and I can touch my brush or my finger on a certain section, and it will come back to me, what I was listening to at that time. It's really associated with some of those songs. I wish sometimes my paintings, on the frame there was a little button you could push as you're viewing it, and that accompanying score would come on.
That's what I kind of want to document is like, these are the songs I listen to. These are kind of share that with folks, like what kind of gets me going. Because that's interesting you said. I've tried to use those as mental bookmarks, and that's what I tell my wife. Like, there's this one band. They're just incredible. They're out of California, and they come out with a new CD every 4 months. I don't know how they do it, and they usually kind of themed a certain way. I said, eventually I'll listen to a song. And this is, just talking about art and the impact that art has on people's lives. Music is something that just is so crazy to me. You get a bunch of notes and you string them together. Yeah. And for some reason, when my brain hears that, it releases all these chemicals in my brain and it changes my emotions. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Whether you want it to or not, it just grabs you.
It's crazy. We look at something, and because you've been able to combine colors in a certain way, it makes someone cry or it brings back a memory.
But I'm always jealous of the musical arts because they seem to be the most emotionally immediate.
Yes.
They can sweep you away. Writing and the visual arts, you kind of have to slow down and participate. You have to give your time to read and get into it, let it take you away. Visual arts, you have to look at it long enough and maybe pose some questions, or you create this dialogue almost. And then it's kind of like it opens the door and it'll give back to you. But if you don't do that, sometimes it has no effect. But music really is something that.
And I was talking about a song the other day, and I said, there's a couple songs on the CD, and I was showing her. I knew she wouldn't have the same, effect it had on her as it did on me. But there was this one song, and I said, it kind of just takes me to this spot with a character of mine, and it's almost like I see this emotional landscape. And I was like, I have to write a whole new scene just because of this song. This song just took me to a different spot. And I see almost like movie trailer sort of flash of this character. And I was like, I need to take him there.
Yeah.
And I want to somehow reflect those emotions back to the reader. And it's just this weird, complex landscape. And I was like, there are certain songs I will put on repeat I can listen to the same song sometimes for an hour. And because there's something there, and I feel it, and I just need to mine it, strip it away, and discover it, and kind of claw around. And my family probably, if they're driving with me, they're probably pulling their hair out because I'm like, repeat, like, Dad.
Yeah, they're not where you are. Yeah, I do
song.
the same thing in front of the easel. How weird. Huh.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah, thank heavens for music. Thank you, all those wonderful,
it's just
talented people.
What a crazy, and that's one of the things I guess it can be discouraging when you see someone that is so good at something, you're just like, I'll never be that good. But I love finding out things that I thought were impossible that are possible. Like seeing this room. I've never been in a room like this before. That's what I said. I walked in this room, I got the chills. I was like, there's a guy out here that lives like this. This is awesome. I didn't know people did this, you know? Like I saw this is going to seem like a silly example, but there was a video of this kid juggling Rubik's Cubes and solving them as he juggled them.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, if you would have told me that was true, I would have been like, that's the most ridiculous thing. That you can't do that. And this kid was 10, right? He was doing this. And I was like, so if this is possible, what other things do I think are impossible that are possible?
I believe that. And I almost think there's a formula. You know, it's, first of all, you have to think about it. Whatever it is, it becomes a thought. And then you talk about it. It becomes part of your vocabulary. I thought of this room and I designed it on my little laptop, and I could do a 3D walkthrough.
Yeah.
And I would then talk about it to my wife, how I wanted it to feel. And then you start moving towards that somehow. Do whatever, even if it's a little step in that direction. I started, drawing up plans, and I went to he wasn't an architect, but he was like a designer. He was licensed to make sure this would stand up, and pursuing it further, and I would pick out, paint colors or whatever it was. I just started doing little things in that direction, and then it's like you start kind of living there in your mind and getting the same amount of enjoyment out of it as you would if it were already happening. Doesn't matter how far away it is, I'm there.
Right.
I would sit in the chair and imagine I was sitting in this loft and just, my swing was going to be over here, and that's where I'm living, and then I think you just live in gratitude of that. You have this thankful heart and appreciation as if it's already part of where you're at. And then even if it's a ways in the future, it doesn't matter because you're already, you're reaping the exact benefits. And I think that somehow opens the channels of manifestation. And you don't get discouraged if you don't see it physically manifest right away. That's not even, that's almost irrelevant because you just know that's,
Yeah, whether it's a household project like this, or I think maybe even a painting or a book or whatever else.
Exactly. It's the same process. It really doesn't matter, and it at least puts you in a happy place.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because that's what I was talking to a friend, and they're ramping up for a big turnaround right now at my former workplace, and it's going to be, you work 13 out of every 14 days, you work 14-hour days, and it's going to be for 3 months, and it's just nightmarish. And I don't have to do that. So I was talking to my friends like, yeah, we're already going to 7 days a week, and I kind of went back into my wife, and I was like, please tell me I don't ever have to go back to that. And I still haven't, because what I'm doing right now, I haven't made financially viable. So there's still something in the back of my head, like, you're just on vacation, pal. I'm there. I'm going to receive you. When you're through with this little exercise of yours, and if anything, that helps just kind of spur me along a little bit. But
well, that's the real world that gives it gives us all feedback, and it's usually feedback, or often feedback, that doesn't match up with our vision. It's saying, what do you mean? There's nothing that's saying that that's even possible. And that's, I mean, I've really gotten into meditation because of my wife over the last few years. And,
Yeah.
you know, there's all different kinds, and, you know, you can have visions of hundreds of different yoga poses and oming and all that, and that's great if you want. But the main part of it is just going to a place inside where you, for a while, shut out
Right.
all of the physical data that's coming to you that may be in opposition to what you're, you know, imagining, and you just have to calm that and put it. It's like an illusion, you know. Yeah, it's there, I see it, but what does it mean? It doesn't really mean anything.
That's
you know?
interesting you bring that up, because I was when I look at a couple of, like Jerry Seinfeld's one of these guys. He's real big, and I look at him as like, that's a guy that just does what he wants to do.
Yeah, gee,
he does
no
meditation.
Huh.
He's really, really big on meditation. I was like, you know, and I was really funny. A couple of nights ago, I was talking to my wife, and I was saying during the turnaround last year, so our site went down unexpectedly, and last winter was a rough time, and so we had to bring this. I mean, 250,000 man hours to bring this thing back up.
Wow.
And it was not a fun time. And I said I would pull into the parking lot, and I would put on the certain song, and I showed her the song by the same band, and I said I would stop, and I would listen to the song, and I would say, for 2 minutes and 30 seconds, I have nothing else to worry about.
That's it.
When the song is done,
Yeah.
I got to kind of like cinch up, gird up the loins and walk in the gate and get, and work for another 13 hours or whatever. But I was like, for 2 minutes, 30 seconds, I'm just going to sit here. And the song was called Have Patience, oddly enough.
Wow.
And and so I would sit there and kind of do this little meditation. And I kind of do that now when I write. Every morning I have a kind of a set of probably half a dozen songs that I really, really like, and I'll sit and I'll listen to one. I won't even write. I'll just kind of close my eyes. My family's probably think I'm asleep if they peek their head in my office. Dad's asleep. And I'll just kind of think, and I kind of want to explore that some more, just how to because it's a mental game.
It really is. It's sure been a helpful thing to me. In whatever form you do that, if you can find, it's almost a spiritual practice to go there, and it can be, it's a creative place, it's a restful place, it's a rejuvenation place, and it doesn't happen immediately. It's kind of that compound effect.
Sure.
It's at first I'm getting like, well, what, I didn't see any amazing things. But if you regularly do that, after a while you kind of go, oh, wow, man, I am not nearly as stressed as I used to be. I feel more centered, and, things are just kind of have a natural flow to them. And for me, it's been a wonderful
It's interesting. I know folks, I listen to a podcast, one of the guys talks about using a sensory deprivation chamber. He's really big on sensory deprivation chambers.
I've done that a couple of times, yeah.
How is that, pretty trippy? Or?
Yeah. Well, we went to a place that was, it had too much sensory input before you got to the chamber. It was like in this dingy basement of a house. And it was kind of like, who was in here last? I don't know, but no, if you do it right, it was a really cool thing.
Huh.
So.
Whole wide world out there.
Yeah.
It's funny, I just focused on one aspect of it for so long, and I kind of feel like I'm coming up for air in a lot of respects in my life, and kind of looking around and be like, oh, this is what other people do.
Oh.
And I know you got a bunch on and you're going to do your camp out. I'm thrilled to come talk to you about this.
Talk with you, really.
Been awesome.
Say hi to all your family.
I will. Yeah, they're kind of bummed
bunch.
they're starting school this week, so they're not going to see Dad do his thing at the Renaissance Fair. I don't even know what I'm doing, but
when does that start?
It's Friday, Saturday.
Friday, Saturday.
Yeah, so it's
dang, I'm going to be
pretty cool. Up in the mountains.
Hunkered down, in a tent somewhere, but that would
see all this stuff in my car. I've got all my Lord of the Rings swords, and I built Ken. Myers helped build this. Kind of looks like a cross. This weird kind of wooden cross that I have all my swords hanging down from, and I burnt it with a blowtorch to kind of give it like an old feel. And
I'm going to have to get you into painting still. Your grade school vision may come true.
I'll tell you, I went back and pulled up some of my old drawings that I was showing my kids. Now they draw little things and kind of look at them and stuff. And I was like, if I could look at something, I was pretty decent. But again, if you asked me just to draw a man, I would be horrible. It would look ridiculous. But
I probably would too. I'm just an observer. You know, I just observe and interpret.
But that's, looking at creative, like you look at comedians, like why do you laugh? It's because a comedian is able to say something in a way that you have always thought but could never verbalize.
Yeah,
and then when you verbalize like that, the recognition, I think, is what makes you laugh, because you're like, oh my gosh, that's totally what I thought, right? And that's what I think creative people do, is they're able to they're able to just observe life and then distill it in a way and kind of give it back to the world.
Things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, I have a pencil too and paintbrush. I can do stuff, and you look at you like, oh, geez, I guess that's what someone can do. like you to me is like the kid juggling the Rubik's cubes. Like, I don't even know how that's possible. It doesn't even make any sense. But man, I'm glad that people are wired different.
Oh, I mean, aren't we lucky to be able to? We don't have to do it all ourselves. We can enjoy everyone's talents, aptitudes.
So cool.
Makes it fun.
There you have it, folks. My interview with Greg. Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed going out there and speaking with the man. Again, incredibly insightful and gracious and creative and funny. It's like, I want to be Greg Olsen when I grow up. Right? As I said, he had some years where he was struggling, but man, has he sort of found his mark and be able to make his mark on the world. And what a cool guy. So hopefully when, after 40 years, after I was talking to him after the interview, I was like, oh, look at this. Everything you got here. All it takes is 40 years of super hard work. Easy. Too easy. So I hope to be there, honestly, in my craft. It won't be painting pictures, but it'll be crafting stories. And just to be able to get that kind of response out of people and make that kind of change in people's lives would be so cool. And then to be rewarded for it and, be rewarded for your passions monetarily frees you up to do all sorts of other things, which I would like to do. So anyway, got a lot out of that discussion with Greg. I've been thinking about it ever since, every day, kind of taking bits and pieces away from it. So hopefully you enjoyed the conversation. Next episode, I'm going to be talking to Stephen Grew. So he is sort of the brainchild, the head CEO, founder of Utah Wolf Productions. He's a guy who's made over 200 short and feature-length films. And he posts them on his website. I believe it's utahwolf.com. And he is the subject of an upcoming documentary, The Insufferable Grew. So another person who is passionate and dedicated and has been putting in the hard yards his entire life. But unlike Greg, he hasn't become world famous or monetarily successful. So I kind of wanted to get the other end of the spectrum. Someone who has done all those things, who has been passionate, who has followed the dream, but doesn't have the cool home studio and swing from the ceiling to show for it. Anyway, another very interesting interview, and one I thought would be very interesting to contrast after this week with Greg to next week with Stephen Grew. All right, see you then, and please respond to the call. Ciao. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Calling All Nerds. To find out more about Mike, his novels, blog posts, videos, and everything else interesting, go to mike-thayer.com.